Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Building Show webinar series. My name is Anthony Youssef. I'm a Senior Program Manager with Informa Connect, and I'll be your host for today's webinar, The State of Housing in the GTA, Data, Projects, and Policies. Today's webinar is in the lead up to The Building Show, North America's leading event for the built environment. You can now register by visiting www.thebuildingshow.com. Today's webinar is in partnership with UrbanToronto. We'd like to extend our thanks to the UrbanToronto team for their continued collaboration with us. We welcome you to send in your questions throughout the webinar. These will be collected and addressed during the Q&A period. Joining us today, we have UrbanToronto research analyst and economist Ash Navabi and managing editor Craig White. We also have Deanna Chorney, manager policy, strategic initiatives, policy and analysis with the City of Toronto. Michael Williams, Managing Partner and Head of Real Estate Development at Hazelview, and Jagat Chung, Principal at Studio JCI. And now I'd like to introduce Ash Navabi. Over to you, Ash.
Thank you, Anthony. Just setting up my presentation. Great. So I'll be giving you an overview of what UrbanToronto is, as well as some of our data on the projects and policies that have been happening in these, particularly in the City of Toronto, with respect to major transit station areas. We still exist as a real estate forum. We are perhaps the biggest real estate forum in the world, talking about construction and development and urban planning and everything related to that. And from our humble beginnings as a forum, we developed a journalism side covering the projects our members were talking about in the database. We are the largest real estate news website now for the GTHA. And from our journalism, we developed the need to create a database for the projects that we track. And the service that we provide based on our database is called UT Pro. And you can use it as a map to track and to get reports on all sorts of developments happening across the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. We have nearly 6,000 projects now in our database, covering lots of municipalities, and we have dozens of fields for every application. Here's our coverage area. You can see we go all across the Golden Horseshoe there. I mentioned MTSAs. So you can use our data to track all sorts of information here. So for today, I'm just going to be talking a little bit about the major transit station areas in the City of Toronto that were just finalized just a few weeks ago. Even though they were finalized a few weeks ago, there was a pretty good consensus of what kind of shapes they would have leading up to them. And here are all the projects we have in our database that are pre-construction in the City of Toronto, as well. These are the black dots, and the green dots represent the MTSAs that were recently decided. And as you could just see visually, there seems to be a cluster within these green areas as opposed to outside of them. It turns out that nearly half of all the projects that are pre-construction in our database right now are within an MTSA, which, as you could see, the MTSAs cover just a fraction of Toronto's area, but they have half of the projects within it. We have about 1,700 pre-construction projects. 857 of them are within an MTSA. And I should just mention, for those who don't know, major transit station areas have more liberalized planning permits. So you can build more dense units there, as well as other benefits that don't apply outside of the major transit station areas. So for developers, they're a big deal. And even though they were just announced, or they're just finalized, I should say, a few weeks ago, we're already seeing the impact of having these more liberalized areas within the city. So just to quickly summarize this data here, within MTSAs, so we covered already about half and half. Despite that, twice as tall buildings and twice as many units. um, as opposed to, or sorry, not twice as many, about 20% more units. So twice as tall buildings, 20% more units. The GFA is also about 30% more. We can also do the same thing for under construction projects, already under construction projects in the major transit areas. There's more of them than there is outside of them. They are taller and they are more dense and way more gross floor area as well. That's just the overview, and that's it from me. And I'll be flipping off to my colleague, Craig White.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay, sorry. Thank you, Ash. I'm sorry about that. Uh, we're just about to start a month of special programming on Urban Toronto about the state of housing. We all know that we are experiencing a housing crisis at the moment that's been building for several years now. And during October, we are going to be looking at a whole number of aspects of the situation and looking at potential solutions. And today we wanted to start, well, before we dig in depth online in print in October, we wanted to address this through this webinar. And so we have gathered people from the municipality, a representative developer, representative architect, where everybody can talk about the issues as it affects them and where they have, I suppose, room to move and where they see, that more help is needed. So Anthony's already given us an idea of who is joining us. First off, I'd like to introduce Deanna Chorney, who is the manager in policy and strategic initiatives, policy analysis of the City Planning Division of the City of Toronto. Her team leads development of social and environmental policy, such as the Toronto Green Standard, the city's rental replacement framework, and the community benefits change framework. Deanna is committed to ensuring policies contribute to making the city a more livable and inclusive place, while continuing to respond to the housing market and broader trends. Deanna lives in the city's West End and is inspired by the diversity of people from all ages and backgrounds, enjoying local community amenities. And Deanna has a presentation that we are going to start with. So Deanna, what do you have for us today?
Thanks, Craig, and good afternoon, everyone. So I thought I'd start off with really just talking about, at a foundational level, all the work that the city is doing to both provide for all the growth and for existing residents as well as for new residents. So certainly, sorry. Certainly, I think if you've visited Toronto, you live, you work in Toronto, you can experience just what this growth feels like on the ground. But really, a lot of it is also in our statistics. So in 2024, we had almost 270,000 new residents join the city, and that's more than 50,000 than the next fastest growing metropolitan area in North America. So you can see on this chart that New York grew by about 50,000 less residents than Toronto. So really, I think what we're feeling on the ground is truly being experienced also in our data. A lot of this growth has happened in very distinct areas of the city, and that was by intention from our plans 20 years ago. I'm going to talk about what we're doing to modernize that. But you can look at in our downtown. So this is looking from the West End of Toronto, looking east. So in 2006, our waterfront area, there were still areas that had surface parking lots. There was still opportunities for new growth. And you can see that skyline has really evolved over the years. There's both new towers throughout our downtown, as well as you can see along the waterfront and in areas surrounding the downtown as well. And some of this is, again, you can see it in the data in terms of that growth and that development. We know that, our market is changing. However, even as recently as Q1 of this past year, we had more cranes on active construction sites in the city than any other municipality or city in North America. So you can see there were over 100 sites with active cranes. And a big part of that is because we've been approving significant amount of housing over the past number of years. So that housing was ready to go and is under construction. It's really figuring out how to get that next round of housing off the ground and build quicker. We look at all of our housing data through what we call our development pipeline. And the pipeline is really a snapshot of over the past 5 years, how many projects have been proposed, what has received, let's say, one planning approval, and then what has recently been built. And so looking at our pipeline, we have a large amount of inventory that has either been proposed to the city and doesn't yet have an approval, or has one approval and it is going through the rest of the permit process. So there's almost 740,000 unbuilt residential units in the pipeline. And really, it's about figuring out how do we get those units, again, to construction readiness and making sure that they're delivering housing for future residents. As part of our pipeline, we've also been tracking purpose-built rental housing because this is a type of stock and tenure that we know, based on trends and data, that this is a really critical piece of tenure in the housing system. And we want to do whatever we can to support getting more purpose-built rental housing that provides more security of tenancy for tenants, is attractive for a big city, and so on. And so, historically, we were seeing somewhere between 5 to 10% of our pipeline as purpose-built rental. More recently, that has grown, and currently about 15% is proposed as purpose-built rental. That's mostly situated kind of along our main avenues where we're seeing transit investment and then in the downtown. And finally, we also track the amount of non-residential space that is proposed. And so that's everything from new employment to commercial to other non-res. And again, you can see a lot of it's concentrated in what we call our employment areas of the city. So, kind of in those outer suburb areas, but a lot of it as well within our downtown where we have strong office markets and within our centers. So certainly, we do have a plan, and I work in city planning, and I'm a planner, and we are really committed to thinking about how do we modernize planning and how do we make sure that we're planning for both our housing targets through the provincial government has given us a number of housing targets, as well as planning for, again, all those new residents, making sure that they have access to new transit infrastructure, community infrastructure, and so on. And so historically, you can see based on these different bar charts, the dark blue and light blue, these are really in our downtown and what we call our centers of where we've seen growth. And so in terms of recently built projects or projects that have received at least one planning approval, about 80% or so of those developments have been in our downtown and other centers or along avenues. You can see that under review, that kind of dark that tan beige color, we're starting to see more applications proposed in other areas of the city. And again, I think that's really based on a lot of the changes that I'll speak to in a minute in terms of how do we make sure that we're growing across the city and it's no longer targeted to just specific areas of the city. So, back in the early 2000s, the plan for how Toronto was to grow was really based on growing around these major centers. So where we had existing transit in our downtown, in Young Eglinton and Midtown area, North York, Etobicoke, and Scarborough Center. And it was about bringing both jobs, transit, residential housing, and all of those pieces together. And you can see that that planning worked, right? So many years ago, we did have some high density towers in those areas. And then today, that has grown tremendously. So you can see, particularly in Young Eglinton, there's significantly more development. I think you can feel that on the ground when you're walking around in that neighborhood. The big move, though, that the city has taken is thinking about we're no longer going to be growing just in those centers. We're going to be growing across the city. And it's going to be at different scales and different typology, but it's about really enabling more housing choices for both existing residents and future residents. So here you can see, we are thinking about how do we enable more mid-rise housing along our main streets, our avenues, providing for opportunities to add a laneway house to an existing neighborhood to your existing lot, providing for multiplexes, local retail, and so on. And so again, the planning of the future in the city of the future will not be the same type of concentration in terms around these specific growth nodes, but really spread out more evenly across the city. And a big piece that we've done and taken big steps around is around adding what we call gentle density in our neighborhood. So you could see before some of these changes, we had a large area of the city that only permitted single detached homes in our neighborhoods. Through changes to our policies and zoning, we've now unlocked almost the entire area of the city that permits residential now allows for multiplex housing as well as garden and laneway suites. We've done a lot of analysis to think about what that potential of housing looks like, when it could come forward, and so on. And so we estimate about almost 125,000 multiplexes and garden laneway suites in neighborhoods across the city could be delivered through some of these changes. We've also making big moves around as of right development for 6-story or 60-unit, what we call projects on major streets. So along those black lines there, really thinking about on that kind of lower scale of mid-rise housing, how are we enabling that housing to be delivered as of right? And building upon that, we've also looked at how do we unlock more mid-rise or high-rise housing along what we call our avenues. So these are kind of higher level of quarters beyond what we call major streets. You can see on this map the brown areas were our existing avenues, and we've added over 282 kilometers of avenues for that higher intensity type of mid-rise, high-rise housing as well. As Ash mentioned, the minister most recently in August of this year approved our protected major transit station areas and major transit station areas. And so this really unlocks two things. One is a big work program for the City Planning Division to enable these policies to be implemented through as of right zoning. So that means that you'll be able to, if you're within one of those transit station areas, you'll be able to hopefully just get to the point of pulling permits and being able to deliver housing faster. The other thing that it unlocks is what's called inclusionary zoning. So inclusionary zoning is a tool that says, when you're building new market housing in these areas, you're also going to be delivering new affordable housing. So for example, in a 200-unit development, you would have to provide about 5% of the units as affordable housing for 25 years. Again, contributing towards that livability and that equity lens in our neighborhoods. So looking forward, we're also working on a number of big pieces that will unlock even more housing. We've been working with the province on what are called transit-oriented communities. So these are areas around new major transit stations through the Ontario line that the province will be working and will be putting out for tender. And really the key piece here is like, how do we make sure that we're getting all that critical new infrastructure that will come alongside the transit investment? So we're looking at how do we get new parks, recreation, a high quality public realm, all those other pieces that make a really desirable and livable community. We also have been working on a number of large studies across the city, but just to highlight two in kind of the north part of the city. One, Downsview, which will have a population of about 15,000 people once it's fully built out. So that's like putting the city the size of Peterborough into Toronto. And as part of that new development, we are planning for ensuring that there's jobs alongside, new recreation centers. There's going to be, continued access to transit. We've planned for how many daycares, how many schools, how many childcare we need, all of those pieces that will really need to be delivered alongside that new population. And we're also working on a plan in Woodbine, which is in the northwest part of the city, to bring forward about 24,000 new residential units in an area that, again, has very little existing amenities. So similarly, thinking through all the additional pieces that will need to be delivered. I would also highlight both these plans will also ensure that affordable housing is delivered alongside those market units. And finally, just to highlight even further work along our waterfront. I mean, I showed that slide of just what it's looked like in terms of changes over the years in the past 20 years or so. And there's going to be even further development, particularly in our Portlands area. So you can see in Aquaman-Minising and McCleary District, we're adding significant population there. And there's also signature projects like our Quayside development that will include new affordable housing, new market housing, as well as a number of new amenities. So, I think in terms of key messages that I want you guys to take away, one is that we've really changed how we grow. So it's no longer targeted to just specific centers. We have now looked at the entire city to really think about how are we redesignating, rezoning to make it easier to build and enable more housing choices. So I'm just going to run through these really quickly, but just to kind of give you a really visual understanding. Again, in terms of our multiplex permissions, you can see that this represents 150 kilometers of land that now have multiplex permissions today. When you add on the avenues, we have about 455 kilometers of avenues with permissions for, again, mid and high-rise buildings. Adding on major streets, which have those as of right permissions for up to 6 stories, that adds about an additional 20 kilometers of housing enabled. And then layering on those transit station area decisions, I think that's about 5,000 additional hectares of land that we're enabling housing opportunities on. And then finally, layering on some of the key work that I highlighted in Downsview, Woodbine and the waterfront. So, collectively, when we think about all of these changes, this really has the potential to create about 2 million new homes in the city. Again, thinking about how we're delivering for existing residents and all of those new residents that we want to come to Toronto. And we know this is not an easy time for delivering housing. So the city has made a number of really targeted pieces in terms of thinking about, again, how do we enable quicker housing delivery and how do we think about the fees and charges? So just really briefly, I'll highlight as part of our multiplex program, we develop certified plans. We have development charge exemptions. We also have an ongoing monitoring program to make sure that the delivery of those units is working. As part of looking at how we get more mid-rise housing in the city, we're looking at a number of pieces and looking at those holistically to make sure, our loading space requirements right for mid-rise, amenity space, urban design guidelines, all of those pieces taken together, are there small or big shifts we can make that would help enable more mid-rise being built more quickly? And then, finally, just highlighting that the work the city has done more recently, which is really about speeding up timelines related to planning approvals. So for instance, for a zoning bylaw amendment, official plan amendment, we've reduced timelines by about 80%, again, leading to faster delivery to then get to those next milestones in the development process. And finally, I just wanted to highlight some of the work we've done around fees and charges. So a lot of this is really thinking about, what can we do in the short term to get all those housing that I spoke about at the beginning that have approvals but aren't yet ready to build? How can we get them in the ground? And so we have frozen DC rates to 2024 levels. We've eliminated DCs for just over 6,000 purpose-built rental units, as well as reduced property taxes for those units. We've also changed our policy regarding below-grade conditional permits, so freezing DCs at an earlier stage. And then, as I mentioned, also exempting multiplexes and laneway housing from DCs from 4 to 6 units. So, trying to unlock some of that multiplex housing as well. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Craig. Thanks.
Thank you, Deanna. I want to underline a couple of things that Deanna said here, and put it in this context. Since I've been managing editor at Urban Toronto since 2010, we've dealt with changes, gradual changes to the housing, the regime in Toronto, I suppose, over time. But the number of changes in the last year or two, comparatively, is enormous, and we're seeing a whole sea change here. People are going to have to, and there's more coming. And as these things come into effect, all these changes, we know that the actual building of housing is a bit of a lagging indicator compared to the policies that go in to allow those housing units to be built in the first place. And so We've got a ton of policy that is completely new in terms of, as Ash put it earlier, more liberal zoning that's coming up until now for the first 15 years at Urban Toronto, I've watched, and everyone in the industry has watched, as basically anything of any size has required rezoning and months and more like years to approve something to go forward. And as Deanna said, the city is working towards a spot where people or developers will simply be looking to get permits, pulling permits, instead of having to rezone every site to get something built. And uh, it's really going to change the way that things happen in this city and how we think about how things are coming about in the future. Now, another thing that Deanna said that she highlighted early on in her presentation was that 15% of new housing in the pipeline is approved purpose-built rental. And I think that's not a bad lead-in to our next guest. Approvals don't necessarily mean shovels in the ground. And there are all sorts of other things, of course, financing that actually allows those shovels to start digging. And one of our next guest, Michael Williams, is with a company that is, I don't know what percentage of that 50% approvals they hold. But Michael is a managing partner and head of real estate development with Hazelview. He joined Hazelview in February of 2020 as a managing partner and head of development. In his current role, Michael maintains management oversight of Hazelview's execution and investment in real estate developments. His execution efficacy and integrity are core benefits in implementing development initiatives across the company and marketplace. Through his leadership, Hazelview's development mandate has evolved with emphasis on sustainable ideas, quality products, and mentoring and team collaboration to do that. And I'll say a high percentage of that is rentals. So, Michael, I know you have a presentation ready for us. And I don't know if I've just thrown a wrench into anything, but take it away.
Well, Craig, you basically gave my entire presentation in my introduction, so I guess my job is done. No, thanks, Deanna, for the download. I think that's extremely important information for the group that are watching to hear. It leads a little bit into what I'm going to discuss. To save people some time, I'm not going to go through all the challenges housing has. I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to Hazelview if you don't know who we are. Craig had said I was here since 2020. I actually started at Hazelview in 2012. I took a bit of a hiatus, was responsible for founding kind of the development platform here. And over the last 12 to 13 years, we've had a tremendous amount of success. So maybe I'll just jump into a little bit about Hazelview and our platform, and I'll share all the work that the team's working hard on. So first of all, just so everyone's kind of aware of who we are a vertically integrated investment company. We own, we operate, we develop, and we invest in real estate. We do invest in multiple asset classes, but our primary business, candidly, is multifamily, and it is in rental. Craig, I think you said it's probably 90%. It's probably a little bit higher than that. Like I said, we have a 20+ year in operations. Behind our platform, we're 13+ years in purpose-built development across the country. So we're not just focused in Toronto. I'll give you a little bit of stats about us, not just throw these at people. They're super important for a couple of reasons. One, it shows the scale and experience of our platform, which speaks to kind of why we've been successful in being able to continue to develop during what is an extremely challenging market. And two is just to kind of highlight what the team's been working on. Although I get to sit up here and have these discussions with all of you, really what it comes down to is the team, the partners that we have at the city, and the partners that we have on the consultants. and contractors. Those are the people that are actually building the buildings. To give you an indication on size, we're about 12.5 billion in our development pipeline that we've grown over the last 13 years. That translates, albeit some of the numbers that you see in the market today, that they don't truly add up, but that translates to about 20,000 plus new homes. Again, I mentioned we are national, so currently we're building in 7+ cities. We have about 2,700 units that we're going to be fully built out in the next 24 months. So those are actually units in construction, currently in construction, whether it be Halifax, Toronto, and Ottawa, to name a few. That will be delivered to market. And of those 2,700, those are 100% purpose-built rental. One thing that's not on the slide that I will just mention of the 20,000 plus pipeline, we've actually been successful, albeit we are a for-profit development company. There's about 500 to 1,000 units that sit in that pipeline that are being built as affordable today. They are slotted for affordable, and so we're working really hard to keep those in the affordable development pipeline, and we're executing on about 150 of them right now within our purpose-built rental platform. Some recognition, should skip past it, but we had some recognition for our purpose-built development of the year and some other ESG standards. Really, what I wanted to highlight with this slide, look, like I said, I get to stand up here and promote, but really what it takes is our team. You can see there's a diverse set of skill sets, and one thing that sets our platform apart, I believe, and that allows us to continue to execute in the market is really the people you see on the screen. Now, I am leaving out some individuals that are part of the project internally, and I do appreciate that. It's a really big team. Everybody works really hard. We are, and we want to be more part of the solution. We truly do believe the city is our partner. Are we at odds on certain sites? For sure. Do we have challenges? For sure, they have challenges with us as well. It goes as far as our consultants as well. Like everybody part of the ecosystem is a true partner. This team that you see in front of you is responsible for executing on those 20,000 units. And I think all the credit kind of is owed to them. So I wanted to put that up here. But you can see part of our platform is a really diverse background of thinking. You got construction experts, you have architects, you have engineers, you have planners, you have professional marketers. All of that bringing together an integrated platform is really the critical piece for success, and it's allowed us to be successful and to continue to develop in today's market. I'll jump to the next one. I talked a little bit about this, but just to give you guys, there's land development, there's construction development. Our development life cycle is from start to finish. It's from acquisition all the way to lease up. When we're buying sites, we really focus. Deanna mentioned a lot of the stuff that the city's working on and how infrastructure is being built. Super complementary to what we do. We try to follow their lead as much as we can. I think it's important to complement each other in the pursuit of supplying housing. So we focus on walkable, sustainable, transit-oriented neighborhoods for the most part. During the entitlement process, this one sometimes a little bit unique. As much as possible, we try to work with the municipalities. It is a little different sometimes because our goal and objective is purpose-built rental from the beginning. So there's a little different perspective. We plan to be part of the community long term. So once we've built and stabilized these assets, we plan to be in those communities for 10, 25 years. So it's really important during the acquisitions and the entitlement phase that we take that lens when we're looking at planning and enhancing those communities. Design development, I'll just speak to this one from an approach standpoint. Again, without our consultants, we couldn't do any of this, so I'll give them the accolades they deserve. Our job is to really push people from the lens of purpose-built rental. And the way that we do that is we have 25 years experience in operating the buildings. That comes with some pain sometimes. It's challenging to operate purpose-built rentals in certain markets. But what we do is we try to hear what's happening, understand how those buildings operate, and ultimately put that in design. What it ends up translating is a complementary system where both residents are happy and investors are happy. If you can create an environment where those two things work while executing this, then you should be successful in supplying purpose-built housing. Financing, you probably heard some of the headlines that have been out there around the largest MLI Select loan. I think someone's already probably top that. Again, the team worked with CMHC for 18 months. It wasn't something that we just made an application and walked away. There was a lot of hard work, creativity on both sides to make that happen. But what we do is our financing strategy is really around how are we going to own and operate this long term, and how can we align ourselves with both financial products and what the city is doing to ensure that the incentives and tools that they're providing us also align with the financing tools that then we can utilize the two together and be successful. Construction for us, some firms are vertically integrated where they construct, totally have an appreciation for that. We don't do that. We do manage the construction. We do a lot of direct buying, but we have a strong belief because we are national, we aren't just GTA, in using local managers. There's a lot of respect for relationships, processes, and people that have been set up over the years. So we really, really lean into our construction managers that have a ton of experience to complement our platform. And that allows us to be nimble, one, and two, it allows us to spread the platform and supply housing, not just in the GTA, but across Canada. And then marketing, leasing, and operations. Not that I'm trying to diminish any of those, putting them together. But again, having the operations team part of the process from acquisition all the way through design development is critical to purpose-built rental. I know there's a lot of talks about people simply converting from condo to rental. I think what the market is starting to realize, it's a little bit more challenging. Appreciate it's multifamily. And the knowledge we get from the operations team along the way is critical for us to be successful. And then that will translate to what I would say is an easier, although Anna would probably argue with me, an easier job to market a product that is easy to operate and actually attracts the person that's going to be using it. Again, just give you a little bit more about us. We've been around for 25 plus years in multifamily. We have a really strong track record for execution. I sometimes maybe show some frustration in the marketplace. That's why I say I don't know if I want to continue to communicate the challenges. We're all kind of aware of them, not too dissimilar to what Deanna provided. We want to be part of the solution. And really what our success is driven by is what I described as our fully integrated process. We have 650 plus people on the ground. I know we skipped forward real quick, but property management, I want to give them a lot of accolades. It's really tough on the ground. It's especially tough when we disrupt on an infill development, for example. So they're doing a great job, and really they're tied to the community and are the lifeblood of the company. So I just wanted to call that out. And then for us, again, this advantage is really just tying all the pieces together in one integrated platform. It allows us to basically uncover hidden opportunities and add value to residents and investors and community members alike. And I believe that approach is going to continue to allow us to be successful and hopefully supply housing across Canada for the next 20 plus years. I think I'm going to leave it at that. There are a couple more slides that are project specific. I don't want to bore people with slides. I'm not one just to stand up here and present. I think the question and answer, both from Craig and then obviously from the audience, is going to be a little bit more impactful than me reading slides about Hazelview and what it is we do. I would say that ultimately, our approach is to continue to find solutions to supply housing. It is tough. We know the problems. I think if everyone shifts their mindset a little bit to like, how can we solve them and implement as fast as possible? Hopefully we're at the bottom of the curve and things start to pick up for everyone. So I appreciate the time, and I appreciate time that people took to listen to me talk about the slides. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Uh, when we come back to you a little later, I think it would be helpful maybe to focus on one of the projects, just so that you could maybe frame your policies in terms of how they're playing out somewhere. Maybe Bloor and Dufferin, that's a project that is for any of our audience that are frequent readers of Urban Toronto, might be the one that they are most familiar with your work at. And so maybe we could talk a little bit more about that later. But first, okay, great. First, I'd like to go to Jigap Chung, who is the JC in Studio JCI. Again, for readers of Urban Toronto, you will have seen the name Studio JCI appear on more and more projects over the last while as this architecture firm has made inroads in the Greater Toronto area. JGAP is the founding member. The Toronto-based architecture firm designs and builds or has built over 8 million square feet of residential projects. He graduated with a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Toronto. And now with over 25 years of extensive experience in high-end residential design, JGAP's innovation and project leadership spans varying scales, neighborhoods, and municipalities. Recognized for his leadership as an architect, JGAP is an advocate for bolstering timeless projects. We see that in his architectural design that contribute to the social, economic, and cultural fabric of the built environment. And nothing goes up without architects. And let's go to you, JGAP. What do you have for us in your presentation?
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it. I believe everyone can see my screen presentation. Okay, perfect. Super excited to present on behalf of 32 really qualified and great team, very committed team. So it's not just me. I'm being represented by they do all the work. I usually don't do too much, really. Michael knows, but I think we are listeners first and problem solvers second. And we listen and to see how our clients align kind of our work with the clients kind of goals and objectives. And we try to find solutions around those kind of project issues. And I think I just wanted to lay it out that at this moment, we're spending a lot of time problem solving with our clients who reposition their projects so that they can get off the ground. And Deanna, I really appreciate everything that you've shared today. I think it's been the city. I really appreciate the fact that the city has been listening and trying to work to solve this problem together. So I really appreciate the fact that we're representing a larger collective problem solvers here today. Our mission since the founding of our practice in 2006 has always been sort of threefold. One is to improve the way people live. And that obviously has to do with housing, but there's also other things like public realm. Evolve the way architects add value. I think this is really, really important. I've been fortunate to partner with TMU and to participate in various different kind of crit sessions at U of T to really think about how we can add value. And that's a whole separate thing that I'll get into. And then third, as an office, we invest in developing a future generation of problem solvers. I think this has been the kind of the three core sort of mission statement at our office that we've been trying to preserve for the last almost 20 years. So I wanted to I like telling stories, and I wanted to kind of tell you, based on the kind of mission statement that I've just outlined, 4 stories of projects that we were able to. I think there are success stories, and hopefully you guys will agree as well. But I just wanted to, and given the fact that I've got very limited time, Craig, and I want to be respectful because I got 46 minutes. I wanted to kind of run through them very quickly for 4 projects and 4 projects, 4 lessons. So this is a site. I call it the Missing Middle Fabric Building. It's a classic missing middle project. It's located at Queen and River Street. And this image is great because you can see how there's existing townhouses on to the left, and to the right is the proposal. And we really wanted to it was a vacant site. And one of the key things that when the client approached us, we said, these are the kind of the critical things. They wanted to get this approval done fairly quick, almost as of right. So we had to go through committee of adjustment, and we went through the site plan approval process. I think we went through the entire thing under 18 months, which is like almost unheard of at that time. We had to go through a lot, but we managed to do this by having the unit count less than 30 units. We were able to get away from having to provide type G loading. We didn't do any parking underground. We did surface parking through the laneway at the back. I would say the second thing was that we kept the building height under 5 stories so that we didn't have to go through kind of an OPA and a complicated rezoning process. The big contender was the ground floor, because the city made us do commercial, and so eventually we convinced them that doing live work is probably better kind of a strategy for activating the ground floor condition. And so we were able to get, eventually after much dialogue, get some staff support. And so we were able to get this thing built, I think, in a fairly reasonable amount of time. And I want to kind of go into some of the technicalities, but basically 28,000 square feet, under 30 units. The unit sizes are fairly large because we want to get that unit under 30 units to kind of bypass that type G loading requirement. But as a result of that, the units became more 2 bedrooms. I think we've got almost 60% of actually 75% of the units are 2 bedroom plus, all purpose-built rental. And we were able to create a product that the client ended up leasing this, I think, record time, I think less than 2 months, completely leased up, and eventually ended up selling. But it's a great example of how we're able to kind of work with the city, achieve the kind of the density targets and the numbers that the client wanted, get the approval and the kind of expedited approval process, while contributing to GHG emissions. Like, this is a fully geothermal building. We incorporated a lot of heat pumps to be able to reduce our kind of and make this a sustainable project. And so I think we were able to kind of meet multiple sort of goals and targets that allowed the city and the residents to gain a really nice quality 29-unit building. The next story is, I call it when renovations make sense. So this, I think, Michael, I don't know if you were involved a little bit, and he's nodding. So there's a project located at Roxborough and Yonge Street, right by the transit at Rosedale subway station. And clearly kind of an underutilized piece of real estate here. One of the things that, again, talking to the client was, clearly you can tear this down and build a 12 to 14 story building, and that would have been a rezoning and a long kind of extended approval process with and it would have been justified. But I think in this case the client decided that they wanted to kind of try to really streamline this process, get the approvals done through a minor variance and a kind of an expedited site plan approval process as much as possible. And so we ended up with a build form that we're, I think, pretty happy with, which is creating a very gentle density. So when I say gentle, we're talking about a build form that's it's actually quite modest for the site, but it met all the kind of the key criteria that I was able to get the approvals at the minor variance. It was actually the only minor variance where the chairman's actually stood up and actually applauded the project. I've actually never been involved in a minor variance application where they did that, and so that was really good. We had full staff support. We were able to get that approvals, all the site plan applications, including, because we're right by the train tracks, we had the TTC, as difficult as they can be, kind of really try to sign off, and true mixed use, because we had commercial at grade, we had offices on that transition floor, and we had high quality 18 unit residential building above. And so we were able to kind of the client was very happy, and I think this is again a really major success for the community and also for the client, and I believe the city also won at the same time. So 3 wins. This is a view from the Yonge Street view. This is what I like to call the Cooksville hybrid mirror-rise, and this is the first time that we introduced this type of typology in the city of Mississauga. So very interesting story. the client bought the site off an approved 24-story high-rise tower. So there was a podium and a high-rise tower approved, and the client said, okay, JGAB, we want to work with you. Let's move forward. And I said, Mr. Client, I think there might be a different way to do this. So instead of a 24 high-rise story with a 750 square meter floor plate, why don't we consider a slab-like structure? Because you can see on the right of the image, there's a lot of like slab-like buildings that were already there. You can see also in the foreground, there's all these slab-like structures that were built in the 70s. That appears to be the prevailing pattern of the build form here. Why don't you consider that typology as opposed to the tower typology, which the city really was pushing for, and they were trying to kind of really implement that kind of policy in this area, urban design policy in the area. And instead, we said, why don't you try flipping it, go horizontal, do it as a 17-story building. So this is what happened. We, instead of doing a high rise, we said, let's go with a hybrid mid-rise form. We reduced the elevator stops by 7 stops. We reduced the exit stairs by 7 floors. We increased the floor plate efficiency from 85% to 92%. So 92%. We've shallowed the building, the build form, so that now all of the units have really generous access to natural light. So better unit distribution, better light, higher efficiency. The key thing, of course, was we had to get this through the city and the design review panel, because it had to go through a very, very complicated review panel process. And so after much dialogue and back and forth, and this is a great example of an image where you can really see the build form kind of stretch out. So after back and forth with the DRP, which we had to go twice, if it was up to us dialoguing with the city, it would have been impossible to get this build form done. Nearly impossible, because the policy around the high rise was very, very clear. But this is what happened. We managed to convince the DRP members that this was the correct build form for the Cooksville area. Then the DRP members in turn went back to the city and convinced the city staff and the urban design staff in Mississauga at that time to say, this is probably a better build form than the high-rise policy that you had. So as a result of this, the council commissioned a brand new studies for Cooksville. And I think this is a really great example of how architects can influence kind of planning and policy makers with the help of DRP members and others. And one of the things I love about this project is that we were able to get it built during the COVID era for, I mean, I don't even want to mention the dollars per square foot, because it was so crazy low. Even with 4 levels of underground parking, we were able to get this project very, very successful and complete, I think, about 30 months or so. But it was a really great example of a project that we were able to kind of, again, meet and address the client's objectives of having a more efficient building. We were able to get the city on our side by creating a build form that we believe addresses better or is more contextually responsive. And third, being able to have higher quality and better quality units with more windows at the end of the day, and not too deep. These are not bowling alley units. These are really, really well proportioned units, which I think it was a really great win. And I think the mid-rise build form has influenced. This is a project that we are looking to start construction next year. And so I believe that because of a success in what we did in Mississauga, we were able to kind of talk to city staff. This is in the City of Toronto, where we were able to kind of discuss with the client and with the city staff that having a mid-rise build form as a new typology is not a bad thing. It helps for multiple kind of different ways. Again, in this case, the 92% floor plate efficiency, having better unit distribution, because your units are not so deep, having the right kind of proportions. 18 stories. The building itself is not huge. It's about 200,000 square feet, but we think that this type of a kind of a slab-like, build form is, and this one we had to go to minor variance and with staff support. So we were able to convince staff that this is the right build form. We were able to convince, I think the client was proposing some affordable units. I think that really made a big difference. But this project and scale of around 200,000 square feet, hybrid mid-rise, I believe is the kind of scale that we believe that the city will start seeing more of, because it kind of balances. It's a fine balance between having the building form fairly efficient, again, as opposed to the podium and the high-rise tower that we've been used to seeing, bringing that GFA down to around 200,000 square foot level, where the units are in that 250 plus minus unit count, which allows for greater absorption. And I mean, Michael, I'm sure you know about absorption. Like with these days, the absorption is a big absorption risk is a big risk as well for a lot of the purposeful rental developers. And so, we think that this type of a housing platform is something that we're going to see a lot more of. And again, we're starting to have more of these being requested of us. And thanks to Deanna and her team and the new mid-rise design guidelines that the city has now implemented, has given us more ammunition to be able to do mid-rises. And by the way, I'm not saying mid-rise or high-rise is a different. It's just a different form of housing. The mid-rises are a lot more attractive right now financially, because they're lower unit counts and they tend to be a little bit more financeable and reducing risk for lenders. But whether it's mid-rise or high-rise, having a build form that's rooted in the specifics are for simple construction, not too many terraces, because every single form of terrace and step backs and complicated building forms will make construction more complex and harder to execute. So at Studio JCI, one of the things that we do really, really well is build phenomenal fabric buildings that are easy to build and execute. And that's been really the focus, focusing on the inside of the units and focusing on creating great amenities. And I think this project is we're super looking forward to it, because it's really, really well amenitized. So on that note, I'm going to give it back to you, Craig.
Thank you, Jacob. It's for everyone else. I'll just say that it's been very interesting seeing these presentations come up. They have not been presented to us in advance, so we're seeing them at the same time that you are, and they're all projects that Urban Toronto has followed over the years in various ways. The River Street infill was one of the first where we saw Studio JCI's name in the Urban Toronto Forum. The Hill and Dale residences that JGAP then outlined on Yonge Street at Roxborough was, followed by quite a number of fans of the way that it was applying a sleek minimalist look to this, challenging site because of the slope on Yonge Street there, and adding something without having to go to complete rezoning, which is a real challenge in terms of the affordability, the way that it cuts into the affordability of projects. And then Artform is the name of that project in Cooksville, that the developers gave that. And JGAP, I did not know that background story. If nobody's written about that before, I think you and I should talk in the future about that, especially as it applies to how that's influencing that project on Perth Avenue, that I assume will be coming to market in the near future. But it's time to dig into some questions that I've prepared for the panelists. And some of these are, well, my first one was really wordy here, but I'm already seeing one question from an audience member that I may take this. The panelists have seen the questions in advance, and I may take question number one and combine that with our first audience question a little later. But let's go to what I had for question number two first, and that is asking each of the three of you, what do you've all got your part of the business, architectural, developmental, policy framework, and you're all working to bring about new housing in one way or another. And I'm asking here, what do you need to see, or what would you like to see? What kind of cooperation uh, do you think needs to occur that has not occurred to the degree it needs to yet from other players in the industry? And I think I want to throw this to Deanna first. Um, Again, what would you like to see from other players that would assist in housing delivery? And at the city, this got to be a huge question. But have so many new avenues to bring housing about, Deanna. How would you
Yeah,
jump?
and thanks, Craig. And for me, this really comes back to partnership when I think about our partnership with other orders of government, and using an example of flood remediation that all three levels of government worked on around the Don River, which helped to unlock tons of housing, an amazing new park in Bagasagay Park. And, when I think about what we're doing to make the Portlands ready for new housing, if we can get that transit investment, if we can get servicing fast-tracked, that will unlock, thousands of units. So certainly, it's not something that isn't happening today, but it does take commitment in terms of really the funding. I think at the municipal level, we're closest to the ground to both the residents and industry in terms of those conversations. But we have a role in working with our partners at both the provincial and federal level to make sure they understand what they can bring to the table as well.
So let's run with that a little further then in terms of funding, because actually, I'll admit, I'm not sure what the situation was with the provincial government and housing initiative funding at the moment, but the feds have jumped in with a lot of money to get things going in terms of affordable units. And Michael, you talked about a percentage of affordable earlier without getting into specifics. And again, I mentioned Bloor Dufferin earlier, and I'm not sure if you've used any incentive funding there or if at other sites, but um, Michael, would you like to jump in at this point and take Deanna's point of government assistance from all levels to get more of this built?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think first, she's hit the nail on the head. I think cooperation at all levels of government is super important. Important alignment on policies. They seem to be misaligned sometimes as they move, whether it be federal to provincial, provincial to municipality, is extremely important. And then obviously reducing the ever-changing policy framework. Developers ask for change, of course. When there's a lot of change happening, it's hard to adapt in the market and to really understand what's going on. As it relates to affordability, I think for us, we have a number of initiatives on the affordable side of things. We're building, for example, 20% new purpose-built affordable in Ottawa currently. So that's 60 units of the 300 with no incentives from the government. At Bloor and Dufferin, which you talked about, it's over 2,000 units. Part of our Section 37 was used to build 56 affordable. So I wouldn't say that it was incentivized from the municipality, but they allowed us to designate the funds and build that out. So it is actually straight to execution. It doesn't sit on the sidelines, not being used for a number of years and then get utilized. So that to us is taking action. One of the points I think is super important is creativity around affordability. Everyone's pushing really hard on one, making housing more affordable. There's a very hard push on building new affordable. I think today you can see by the number of condo developers and rental developers that have been sidelined just strictly by cost. It is a fundamental issue is if you can't afford to build it, it's hard to build. So creativity around affordability, I think there's some existing rental stock. I know the Rental Protection Fund is looking at this a little bit, but there is existing rental stock that could go through a pretty material reposition or renovation and be quickly delivered as affordable if there's deals and incentives set up both by the municipality and different levels of government. That one, we actually were doing that in tandem of building new in Ottawa. We designated in our existing towers 10% of them affordable as the affordable offering. It does cost less to the developer for sure to do that. Like there's no doubt about it, but it gives us the opportunity, one, to deliver immediately, two, to deliver more because it does cost less. And three, the housing typology is actually pretty good because you're going through a pretty material renovation. So what would typically be provided to the market ends up getting designated affordable. I think the big thing that Deanna spoke to is super important, and we're trying to get our heads around it, which is transit investment and infrastructure speed. I mean, if you look around the world, we are in Toronto, a world-class city. The time it takes, I'm not going to beat up the LRT. I think everyone's done that enough. I think the time it takes to spend the DC dollars on infrastructure upgrades is just not fast enough. We need to find a way to get infrastructure built. Building infrastructure, to Deanna's point, makes it more affordable and more feasible for us to be able to develop within those nodes. Without infrastructure, you face two things. One, people can't ride transit, for example. That's bad for all developers, condo, rental, office alike. The other piece too is we spend a lot of time negotiating and sometimes arguing over municipal infrastructure upgrades that are required outside of DCs. And so when the existing infrastructure doesn't exist for expansion, even though it's an area like Yonge and Egg that has been slotted for expansion for a long period of time, the developer almost gets downloaded the responsibility of not only designing but implementing infrastructure, even though there's a fair bit, I don't know the actual dollar today, I haven't reviewed the budget, but there's a fair bit of DC dollars sitting on the sideline, not really doing anything. So I think a couple of like just takeaways. Creativity around affordability. I grew up in affordable housing. I don't disagree. It's super tough to develop. It's really becoming more and more difficult to develop. If market doesn't work, it's hard for affordable to work new. I think looking at the existing rental stock and considering it for affordable is one that not a lot of people talk about, but it gives you the availability to go right away. And then truthfully, and I'm not pointing at the city or anyone directly, spend the infrastructure dollars and get the work done. It's taking far too long to execute that, and you need that for developers to have feasible projects. And the more feasible projects, the more supply you put into the market. And I know people are, may agree or disagree with this, but the more supply, there's a thing called filtering in housing. The more supply you put in the market, the naturally older stock or unrenovated stock or even new stock becomes more affordable all the way through. And that is housing filtering. And there's a lot of case studies around the world that support that methodology. It's just hard to do today because we're not actually supplying that much.
Thank you. I'm just thinking here in terms of like most of what you're doing, Michael, is rental, and we have a question from an audience member regarding purchasers and affordability for first-time buyers. And something that JGAP said made me, I know that JGAP can't speak for the developers of Artform directly, but JGAP, you mentioned that with your reworking of the floor the floor plates at Artform in Cooksville, that you were able to raise the efficiency of the building from 80-something% to 90-something%.
85 to 92.
And I assume that means in terms of sellable space on each floor?
Yes, Correct.
So do you know if that translated into unit prices? That's, we have a member, an audience member here asking, what's being done to make new housing feasible and affordable for first-time buyers? And I suppose when an architectural firm is looking to make a building more efficient in that way, that could be an answer in your case, although,
Can I,
you're not the one putting the price on the unit.
so if I may, Craig, I'm going to give you a non-architectural response, which I think is more impactful than an architectural response, and that's,
Sure.
as you know, the way that um, 90 plus percent of the new housing in the last in the GTA core, not Canada, but in the GTA core has been in the form of condominium apartments because we have limited land and sort of the green belt kind of locks us in, which is a separate discussion. But in that kind of 90% kind of condo, let's say ownership model, uh, what's demonstrated is that kind of pre-sales, right? Because you need to achieve pre-sales to get the financing approved. That model has what it's done is actually the incentive structure has been for investors being able to afford these units in hopes to flip or assign or what have you. And in that equation, the homeowner and the end user has completely been erased, the homeowner and the end user. So it's not need-based, it's whatever condominium structures, homes have become financial instruments, which has been really, really, really sad. And of course, we're experiencing the kind of that unfolding in the market today. And so New York City and other parts of the world has a different kind of financing structure, different lending structure for these condominium ownership buildings that allow for end users to buy into these things as end users, not as investors. And I think until that changes, it's going to be very, very difficult. The lending structures fundamentally have to change, I think. So again, it's a response, but it's not a response from an architect's perspective. But I think this is, and credit to Michael and the Hazelview. You guys are going to build phenomenal purposeful rental projects. Unfortunately, there's not enough of Hazelviews in Canada. I wish there was, but there's only few Hazelviews to go around. And even if they're doing a phenomenal job, the market still, young people still want ownership as a way to build equity and wealth in this country. That's the Canadian dream. We all want to have a piece. And, I would say that piece of financing future condominium projects or future ownership projects has to fundamentally be revisited and looked at.
Have to become more like the financing that allows purpose-built rentals to go forward at this point with a different outcome at the end.
Yeah. Craig, I'll just real quick. I've actually worked in the condo market as well. One thing that's really important is there has been incentives, and the city's done a great job continuing to try to find ways on purpose-built rental. I think if you ask the condo industry today, there is a lack of incentives even through the municipality and the federal level. The other thing that really needs to be addressed is the first-time home buyers allowance. The value is pretty insignificant when you look at where home values have gone. It hasn't moved materially. So reassessing on the federal and provincial level, more the federal level related to home buyers rebates. But like things have moved quickly in 5 years, and policy, albeit some is moving fairly quick. In order to get housing to be affordable, I'm going to stay away from the cost. We all know it's just a fundamental of it costs you $1,000 a foot. You can't sell it for $800 a foot. If it costs you $1,000 to build, all things equal. So I think we need to figure a way to lower costs. Obviously labor supply is becoming more problematic on the trade side. I think we've all beat up the city to death on DCs and where they sit. So I'm going to stay away from that. I think tax, first-time home buyers, Those are the ways that people are going to own houses. It is becoming more challenging. And if you look around the world, especially Europe, almost impossible unless you're getting, home ownership handed to you. I don't think that's where we all want to go. It also hurts when condos aren't being developed even on the rental side from a supply perspective. We're building purpose-built rental, but JGAP mentioned there's a lot of investors on the condo side. They actually supply a pretty material amount of the rental units on the market as well. So I know I'm going to talk to my condo friends and maybe they'll pat me on the back for this. We beat them up and sometimes I get a thumbs up. I'm willing to take that for sure. But they are actually supplying rental in a way in which isn't traditional purpose-built rental. So we got to be cognizant of that and ensure that we're incentivizing all types of housing. The only way to get out of this is not to isolate. We need to incentivize all types of housing. We need to work together and we actually need to execute. We know the problems. We've talked about the problems for the last 5 years. I think we just need to get moving on what is actually going to make things move forward. What we need to do as a development industry, candidly, is when things do work, we need to tell the municipalities, good job and thank you for doing that. And it is working so that it's just not noise around what doesn't work. And so we got to do a better job at that because if they're getting feedback loop, not too dissimilar to even on your teams, if they're lining up all the positives and they're willing to move on the negatives, it's going to be easy to start to stack those. If we constantly barrage on all the things that are wrong and don't tell them what they've done right, they're just going to keep trying things and maybe they're going to get rid of policy that's actually a positive for us and not even know it. So I think those are some important facts that we gotta get straight on both sides of the fence.
Deanna, do you have any response to that or no? Go
No,
ahead.
just, yeah, I'd agree that absolutely that communication piece and partnership is critical.
So we are seeing a fair bit of incentive, financial incentive coming from, federal government, especially lately and the city in regards to purpose-built rentals, which, yes, are sort of being treated like a panacea to a degree at the moment. But, from the city, no development charges for affordable units, et cetera. Applying more incentives to get all types of housing built is, I suppose, what Michael's looking for here too, not just that. I want to move on to a couple of other areas now. We've got some more questions from our audience. And before digging into one from Christina, you'll know who you are. I want to ask Deanna a little bit more. This might lead into this. That regarding returning, affordability to the Toronto housing market being crucial, and that, higher densities are inevitable results of this new housing. Because of that, a city, we can't simply be denser and still function as we always have. So I'm wondering, Deanna, can you talk about what other areas that, your part of city planning is focusing on to keep Toronto appealing and attractive to live in?
Yeah. And I mean, a big part of the work my team does is about, kind of to Mike's point, in working with our partners who do have development charges and helping them to plan for all that needed, particularly community infrastructure that we know is going to make our cities more livable. So right now, we're doing a study in North York reviewing the existing secondary plan that's been in place for a very long time. It's outdated. And as part of that work, we've been meeting with all our different partners, including local agencies, childcare providers, community recreation, all different folks, and trying to figure out how are we going to make sure that as all this growth continues, that we are delivering all of those pieces that are really critical. So, a library serves everyone from people who are taking their kids there to a story time to someone who's unhoused and needs a place to sit down and is a warm and welcoming spot. So all of that work is really about planning for the future. And all of our sector partners put in their 10-year capital plan to figure out, okay, we know this growth is coming now. We're going to plan for that library expansion in, 2036 or what have you. The other big piece that we've really been focusing on is just how to make the city more beautiful, right? And so a more welcoming public realm, clean, beautiful city is again a big priority, that work we're doing to try and embed through both the development process and just city building in general.
So, Christina Senjuk, an audience member here, is asking in particular about green roof bylaw and other climate and sustainability targets for new development. Toronto's had a green roof/white roof bylaw for a while now, I suppose, in terms of trying to keep the city cooler, and there are other aspects of that. I know that there was some talk that new provincial government legislation was going to curb Toronto's ability to keep things green as they go. Can you talk a little bit about where that's going now?
Yeah, so the Toronto has what's called the Toronto Green Standard, and that's been in place for over 15 years. We also have a green roof bylaw, like you speak about, that talks about, on different types of developments, we want either different biodiversity or a white roof in certain instances. And I think the key piece to keep in mind is that we know our climate goals, we still need to continue on with those. We are mindful of what is the impact of changing some of our requirements in this housing market. And so absolutely, the work that my team does is always making sure that we're getting up-to-date financial analysis and economic analysis to understand if we make this tweak, what happens. But I'm a mom of a 10-year-old and 6-year-old. Like, I want to make sure that the world in front of them is also, it's going to be affordable, but it also needs to be healthy and livable, right? So it's about balancing all these pieces. And yes, they're not going anywhere at this time.
Going further down the green route, we have a question by another member of our audience, Michael Cortese, asking about embodied carbon. And in other words, if you have infrastructure on a site already and you are redeveloping the site, are there ways, or what's being looked at, I suppose, to cut down on releasing a lot of carbon into the atmosphere in the demolition process, and then again in a construction process? How do we cut that down? And I'm wondering, Gap at Hill and Dale Residences on Yonge, that building was expanded from, was it 3 to 6 floors or something like
Yeah.
that? And so there would have been embodied carbon savings there.
Absolutely. So at Hill and Dale, we went from a 3-story existing. It was a steel with a metal decking existing kind of system, and we basically had the option of doing it in concrete. We explored obviously different options, but we ended up kind of opting for another steel frame building above an existing steel without demolishing and preserving all the existing foundations and footings. And we haven't done the calculations, but I would imagine that there was a significant amount of savings there from a footprint point of view. But the other thing is, we didn't go another level below grade. Like, we just maintained the one level of underground parking that was existing, and which meant that people needed to walk to the stores, which means that maybe less residents actually had or were incentivized to drive. Why? Because, well, we had the Rosedale subway station right next door, and I think all the kind of the PMTSA and MTSA policies that the city is enforced or encouraging, and I think to Ash's initial presentation about how a good significant amount of new projects are in that zone, all contribute to lower carbon embodiment, because less people driving means less carbon in the air. Now, having said that, that cannot be the only form of housing, and I know with autonomous driving, and which I'm hoping will be the new norm in the next 3 to 5 years in the city of Toronto, which I believe it will be. I think some of our questions around parking and is going to be fundamentally be different, and the way that we see the city and development, future development of our projects is going to look very, very different, which I'm really looking forward to.
If I can just add on to Jacob's point, within those transit station areas, the province also, as part of approving those policies, said there's no minimum parking requirements. So by eliminating any underground parking, you're significantly reducing the amount of embodied carbon that would come as part of that building process.
I think beyond that, Michael Cortese may be wondering about reuse of existing buildings where, downtown we see a number of older office buildings that have hit the end of their life in terms of the usability for the commercial office market. But Michael, we don't really have anything that we can, I think, dig into too much in that regard today, but we're going to be looking at those kind of conversion projects as we come up to state of housing stories throughout October on Urban Toronto. And then Christina, you had one more question regarding record low construction starts lately, and that it's going to take years to get out of the slump that we are looking at the moment. And I don't know if there is anyone that can address that today other than sort of saying, yes, we're facing that. And it's going to be very interesting to see how we dig out of this construction start hole at the moment. But just to wrap things up for today, I'm going to come back to a little bit about what Ash was talking about early on. Urban Toronto has been compiling more and more and more data. We have dozens of fields now that track every project. The average Urban Toronto reader can find out all sorts of things about projects just by digging into the forum threads that follow each project, or using the database as sort of an FAQ about each project. They're all linked to the forum threads. You can find all of these things by clicking around on our map. Urban Toronto Pro, which is urbantoronto.ca/pro, for those that want to get more into the development end of things, presents all of the data that we've been tracking and that may help developers of any size look more into everything that is going on with the various projects in the city at the moment that, hopefully is making them financially feasible and getting us back to a spot where, a year or two ago, we had 354 cranes in the air. That across the GTA, we're down to about 250 now, as projects are completed, not as many are starting. But urbantoronto.ca/pro may be an avenue for a lot of people watching to get a lot of the data that they are wondering about. So I will turn this back over to Anthony to wrap everything up, and thank all of our panelists today for coming on in the meantime. Anthony.
Thank you, Greg. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers and everyone for joining us today. I'd like to remind you to visit www.thebuildingshow.com to learn more and register for this year's event. Thank you.